Thanks everyone for joining this session today. This session is going to be called A Little Obscure, A Little Random, and a Lot Useful Tableau Techniques by the Flerlage Twins. This is Kev and Ken Flerlage, and they are from the US, and they're both Tableau Zen Masters. But I'll let them introduce themselves a little bit more. So thank you, Kev and Ken, for this session. Over to you.
Thanks, Lorna. Thanks, everybody, for having us, welcome us. Like Lorna said, we are identical twins. We are both Tableau Zen Masters. I could get my thing to switch. Apparently, I'm a total amateur at presenting, too. That's me on the left. That's Ken on the right. Not only are we identical twins and Tableau Zen Masters, we also run the website FlerlageTwins.com. So hopefully many of you have been there and checked it out. Since we're identical twins, lots of people want to know how alike are we? So this is probably one of the most common questions we get. And we are a lot alike, but let's kind of maybe dig into a little bit of data and to show how alike we are. Let's start off where we live. I live in a place called Burlington, Kentucky. It's about 20 minutes outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, fairly big city in Ohio. Ken, he lives in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, which is 20 minutes outside of absolutely nothingness. I think he cracked a joke in the chat earlier that he is in the middle of nowhere. It's true. He's probably 20 minutes from several cow pastures. What we like to visualize. So Ken tends to visualize serious topics like religion, war, endangered species, and often visualizes politics. Where me, I like to dig in and really tackle the tough subjects like Adam Sandler, video games, cartoons, and famous hot dog eating competitions. But ultimately, we both do this stuff for a living. We're both Zens, and people want to know who's the best at it. Well, again, we'll use some data here. This is Cerebro. I can never say it right. Cerebro. This is from Joshua Tapley, who's basically pulled down data from Tableau Public and ranked things in number of favorites and views. So if we zoom in on this top authors by favorites, we'll see your fearless leader, Andy Kriebel, always kicking everybody's butt. But then you see yours truly in number 2, and then Ken miles behind me in number 3. Pretty embarrassing, Ken, that you're only a 3rd. And then if we look at authors by followers, we can kind of zoom into that too. I'll say, all right, big deal, Andy Kriebel again. And me in 3rd place with 4,200, and Ken a distant 6th. So kind of embarrassing there, Ken. And we would talk about actual.
All right, Kev. I think everyone gets the idea.
all right. I'll stop that. The truth is, Ken was a Tableau Zen Master before I even downloaded the software. He's was a DBA prior to that. He has a lot more skills than I'll ever have. He's better at this stuff than me, and he really taught me a lot early on. So I thank him for everything. And the answer to the question, who's better, it's Ken. Just not the numbers don't say that.
Thanks.
All right. The real about us, yeah, we're identical twins, Zen Masters. We're both Tableau ambassadors. Ken is a Forums ambassador. I'm a Tableau Public ambassador with the Lorna Brown. We run FlerlageTwins.com together. Ken is the Assistant Director of Data Analytics at Bucknell University, and I'm the Manager of Business Intelligence at Unifund in Cincinnati. So today we're going to be talking about Tableau techniques. Not just any Tableau technique. We're going to be talking about things that might be obscure or random. They might not actually be obscure, but they might be unknown or unutilized. In general, they're all really, really useful techniques. They're techniques that I use every day in my day job. And I just think in general, a lot of them are underutilized. So we're going to talk about 4 generalized techniques. We're going to be digging into numerous use cases for each of them. all this stuff has been written in blog posts prior to this. So if you want to just go to this one link will take you to all the different blog posts. We'll dig into all these different topics. So feel free to just sit back and relax. Don't try and take notes. And again, this session will be recorded anyhow. So let's get to it. To start off, I'm going to pass it over to Ken, which means I need to stop share and allow you share.
All right, thanks, Kev. So I've got two sections here that I'm going to share, two sections of techniques I'm going to share. The first, we're going to sort of ease into it with some simpler techniques, and then we're going to get into some more technical techniques in the order of operations. So this first section I call hidden in plain sight. These are techniques that are really easy to execute, and they're really powerful, and yet I don't see people use them all that often. And quite frankly, I've just learned most of these in the last, maybe 6 months, a year, or something like that. So I think that there are techniques that not everybody necessarily knows. So I'll share 3 of these, and then we'll get into some things with the order of operations. So sorry, I'm trying to get this thing out of the way here. So the first thing I want to talk about is hiding marks. So it's pretty common to have a line chart like this, and you want to highlight the min and the max value on that chart. So what I typically do is I'll create a calculation that does something like this, and don't worry about what this, all the details of this, but basically it's looking at each point on this line and pulling back whether it's the min value, the max value, or nothing, right? Neither. Then what I'll do is I'll create a calculated field that basically just says if it's not neither, so it's the min or the max, then give me the sales or the sum of the sales. And then I'll use that on a dual axis like that as we have here, and I color by this high-low. So because neither didn't return a value in this measure, it's always null, and you just get a mark for those min and max values. But recently I discovered a super simple technique that I had no idea existed that makes this a lot easier. So let's go back to sort of this base chart where we've got a mark for each one. In this case, I just have a dual axis on sales to create those marks. And again, I'm coloring by high and low here, as you can see here. So the simple technique is just to right click here on the legend on the item I don't want to show and do hide, and it disappears. So I had no idea that existed. For a line chart like this, it's not too hard to do the other technique. But when you get into some really complicated types of things like drawing curves, and you need to hide one of those marks, it starts to get really difficult. And this is a super simple technique that makes that way easier. Now, there are times where maybe you don't want to use color, you just want these to be the plain gray. To do that, what I would say to do is to start off by dragging it to color, right-click the item that you don't want and hide it. And then you can just take this and drag it to detail, and you'll get just the gray marks, or whatever color you specify here for those marks. And then the final thing I'll talk about, this thing is going to be a problem here the whole day here. I'm not sure how to get rid of it. But anyway, the last thing I'll show you is to get those back. Like sometimes you might accidentally do that, or you just want to bring those back. You just go to Analysis, Reveal Hidden Data, and it'll bring all those marks back for you. All right, so the second thing I want to show you is using discrete color on a highlight table. So we might have something like this where we've got a little text table that has subcategory and my segments, and I want to highlight, and this is showing profit, and I want to show the top 2 profits and the bottom 2 profits, and I want to use slightly different colors for those. So a dark blue and a light blue and a dark red or dark orange and light orange. So what you might do, you're going to start with a table like this. And what you might do is create a little calculation like this. And don't worry about, again, the details of this, but basically this is going to return top 1 for the highest profit, top 2 for the second highest, and then likewise bottom 2 and bottom 1. Otherwise we get none back, right? And this is going to be a discrete field because of this text. So then you would drag this up to color. We change it to a square so we get the background color, and then you end up sort of trying to size it just so these things line up. And no matter what you do, these marks just end up overlapping each other, and you can't get them to line up the way you want them the way you want them to. So historically, my approach has always been to use a continuous color for that. So instead of that discrete field, I would do something like this, where I'm returning a numeric value. So 2, 1, -1, -2, and 0. And then when we use that on the color palette, we're going to get in this case, we're going to get a diverging palette because we've got negatives and positives in here. Again, we'll change it to a square. You can see that these marks are now confined to their space nicely. And then I can change color, and let's choose the orange, blue, white so that these turn into white. And now we have this nice highlight table, just like we wanted. Now, one of the problems with this, though, is that it's not real flexible. Like, let's say, for example, I want to change this light blue mark. I want this to be pink for some reason. To do that, it's difficult with a continuous or with a continuous pill, because I'd pretty much have to go and create a custom color palette to meet that need. So it's not very flexible, and it takes a little bit of extra work to get that to happen. So the technique I just learned, I spent a lot of time on the forums. I'm a forums ambassador. I just learned this by seeing somebody do it on the forums. So I want to share it with you. So we'll come back to, we're going to use this calculated field again, right? So we're going to drag that onto color and change it to square, increase the size again. And so we have this sort of big mess of overlapping marks. So the trick is really just to create an inline calculation with just an empty string. It could really be any value, but in this case, it's easier with an empty string. And then I'll drag it down to the rows as well. Let's increase the size of these columns. And then I'm just going to hide these columns. And now you can see by just creating those extra pills on the rows and columns, these marks now get sort of confined to their space. And because it's a discrete palette, a discrete pill, I can manually change these however I like. So now I have something that looks just like my continuous palette. But if I want to change that second highest to pink, I can do that really easily here. And it just creates a lot more flexibility in being able to create and manage the color on this highlight table. So I love that technique. It's super powerful and really easy to execute. So I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of it as well. So the last hidden in plain sight technique I want to talk about is Excel tables. So it's pretty common. I meant to bring this up before we started. It's pretty common to have really badly formatted Excel data that doesn't work well with Tableau. So in this example, we actually have two sets of data. We have Russian authors and their books, and we have subcategory sales. And these are totally unrelated. And I'll often see these kinds of things coming out of like an enterprise system that tries to create this pretty formatting of your Excel data and try to cram too much together on one page. And it just makes it really difficult to analyze in Tableau. And what happens when you connect to this in Tableau, wrong connector. Sorry, my mouse is jumping around on me. What happens when you connect to this in Tableau is you just get this sort of mess of all the data crammed together, and it's pretty much impossible to work with that. So there are a couple of techniques for dealing with this. One is we can do it within Excel. So if we select this table of information and go to this format as table, I can select any of these formats. The key thing is I'm telling Excel that this is a table, right? And it's going to store it as this sort of separate table object. So I need to do that with both of these tables, and then we'll save this. And now if I come back to Tableau and connect to that new spreadsheet, what you'll see is that Tableau recognizes those two separate tables in there, and I can bring them in separately and work with them individually as desired. This also works with named ranges in Excel. So if you use named ranges, if you create a named range, it'll create a separate table like that as well. So as I was preparing this presentation about a month ago, I've discovered that I'm overcomplicating this. So I'm going to go and I'll show you how we can do this a little bit easier. So I'm going to go back to the original, and we just have this messy table. If I turn on the data interpreter, the data interpreter is super, super smart, and you'll see it actually sees and recognizes those two separate chunks of data and creates separate tables for it. So no need to go back to your Excel. You can just use the data interpreter and let it figure out which tables you have and then use those directly. All right, so let's switch gears. Those were some simple techniques. Let's switch gears and talk about the order of operations. So the order of operations, in my opinion, is one of the most critical pieces of knowledge and understanding that you need in order to master Tableau. It really allows you, once you understand it and you know how to leverage it, it really allows you to bend Tableau to your will and make it do exactly what you want it to do when you want to do it. So what I'm going to share, I'm going to talk a little bit about the order of operations, what it is, and then I'm going to share 4 sort of common problems that I see and how to leverage the order of operations to correct those problems. And a lot of these I've just seen, in my day-to-day work, but also they're common things that I see on the forums as I'm answering questions. So quickly, the order of operations, this is the chart that we're all used to seeing on Tableau documentation. It starts at the top, and we have the extract filters, which are the very first thing that get computed. And then as we go down the order of operations, these things are getting computed further down and downstream until we get to the very end where we have trend lines and reference lines, which are kind of the last thing to get computed. So one of the most common problems I see with the order of operations is with fixed level of detail calculations. And this is often something I see with people who are new to level of detail calculations, starting to get their feet wet, and they inevitably run into this problem. And I know I was the same when I first started learning level of detail calculations as well. So in this example, I have customer name and I have their first order date. So the first time they placed an order. And this first order date is just a level of detail calculation that fixes on customer name and gets the minimum order date. But my users, they might want to be able to look at a specific category of product and see what the first time that a person bought that, right? So I've added a filter on category, and now I start to select different items, and I notice that no matter what I select, my dates stay the same. So when you see a problem like this, there's a very good chance that it's an order of operations problem. So let's take a look at the order of operations that's impacting us here. So what we have on this view is we have a fixed level of detail calculation, as we show here, and that category filter is a dimension filter. So we can see that the fixed LOD is computing first, and then the dimension filter. So it's looking at the entire set of data. Tableau is looking at the entire set of data, getting the first order date for each of those customers, and then the filter is being applied, right? So that's the reason the date never changes, because that filter is coming after the fixed LOD. Now, to fix that, we can use a context filter. So we just want to change that dimension filter to a context filter. So if I go back to my view, all I have to do is right-click this filter to add to context. And now you'll see as I select these different items, those dates start to change, right? So now with the context filter is computing first, and then the fixed LOD. So that's one of the most common problems I see, and it's super simple to fix. Another sort of related problem I see is with top-end lists. So here we have a list of our customers and their sales, and we're showing the top 15. And we're showing the top 15 using a filter on customer name, and we're doing top 15 by sales, as you can see here. But what I might want to be able to do, this is looking at all the data for now, but what I might want to be able to do is filter down to a specific year and say, which customer it works, which are my top 15 customers for these given years, right? So I've added a filter on year, and as I deselect these, we start to see some problems here. So if I go down to just 2020, I see two sort of key problems right away. One is that I no longer have a top 15 list. I only have top 14. So what happened to number 15, right? The other is that this 14th customer, $13 a sale is not very big. So there's clearly something wrong there. I know my 14th largest customer has to have more than $13 of sales. So once again, we're dealing with we're dealing with an issue with dimension filters and context filters. The top N filter computes in the same sort of place as fixed LODs. Our year filter is a dimension filter. So if I want that year filter to go up above the top N filter, I just need to make it a context filter. So let's do that. Add this to context. And you can see now as I start to deselect these, I continue to have a top 15, and I'm seeing values that are more, more reasonable for what I would expect. All right, so let's talk about table calculations. So those first two were sort of to ease you into some of these concepts, but now we're gonna deal with some little bit more complex topics. So here I have a list of my cities and states with their sales, and they're ranked. So it's every city and state in the US that bought from Superstore and the rank of their sales. And my users want to be able to drill down into specific states and see how those cities rank for a given state. So I've added a filter on state. And over here, I'm just going to choose Pennsylvania since that's where I live. And we now just see the cities in Pennsylvania and their sales. And that's great. It's working perfectly. But what I really want, but the problem here is that it's re-ranking these for, so it's showing me the rank within the state. And what I really want is to maintain the overall rank for the whole country for each of these cities. So if we go back and look at all, Philadelphia was actually ranked number 5. And so what I want is to keep that number 5. So to do that, we're gonna sort of trick the order of operations, right? So let's look at what's in play here. That filter, the state filter, is a dimension filter, and we're using rank, and that's a table calc. So we can clearly see that that dimension filter is computing first, and then the table calc. So what's happening is it's taking our data set, chopping it down to just Pennsylvania, and then it's doing the ranking, right? So it's not seeing any of those other cities, which is why it's ranking them individually for just those in Pennsylvania. So what I want to do is find a way that this filter will compute after the table calculation. And what we can do is try to force it into being a table calc filter to make that happen. So this is a really handy trick that I learned from Pooja Gandhi, who's a former Zen master and really brilliant. So what we'll do is we'll create a calculated field like this, and we use lookup, and lookup is a table calculation. So we're using lookup with an offset of 0, and lookup with an offset of 0 is basically just going to return that value that we're giving it, right? So it's going to return a state, but it's going to force this to be a table calculation. And when we use it as a filter, it becomes a table calculation filter. So let's show this. Let's do single values. So we're good in this case. Remember, Philadelphia is number 5. Now, if I go choose Pennsylvania, we can see that we've maintained our rank here. So again, remember what this is doing, right? It's looking at the entire data set. It's doing that rank, this table calculation here. And then after the rank is computed, it's using that table calc filter to filter down to Pennsylvania. So that's why it's maintaining the rank, because it's ranked the whole data before it's applied that filter. So one more technique here, and it's similar, but a little bit different. It has to do with table calculations. This technique is really nice for creating bands. So let's say we want to show the year-over-year growth from 2019 to 2020 in a nice little band like this, right? To do that, you probably start with a simple little table like this, where we have 2019, 2020, we have our sales, and then I've just used a quick table calculation percent difference to get our 20%. So what we really want to do is isolate this number. So it seems like that'd be pretty easy, right? I can just filter out 2019. But as soon as I filter out 2019, the difference is no longer computed. That table calculation needs the 2019 row on there in order to calculate that percent difference. So what we want to do is something similar to the last one, is force the filtering to happen after the table calculation. And we could use a similar technique to what we did before, but I'm going to use this last function for that. So last will basically count the number of rows from the last record in the partition. So for this example, this last row will be last equals 0. This first row will be last equal 1, and then we would move up from there. There's also an opposite function, which is first. So we're just saying is if last is 0, then true, else false. And what we're going to do is use that as a filter. True. And again, this is a table calc filter, right? So it's going to compute this table calc first and then do the filter, which is why we're able to maintain this value in this case, right? Then from here, we can just remove some of the fields we don't need, hide the headers, make this entire view, size this up, and we have this nice little band used by just sort of tricking the order of operations in this case. Which I think that's a super cool little trick and technique, and it's certainly easier than a lot of the other methods for doing that. So, I don't know about you, Kev, but I hate when I accidentally click, when I create a band like this and accidentally click on it, or my users end up clicking on it and you get this big blue square. I really wish there was a technique for fixing that, but
I agree.
Maybe they'll add that at some point. Anyway, so the order of operations, super powerful. Understanding how to use it and to sort of bend it to your will can really help you to become, a master at Tableau. So definitely check it out. Check out the blog as well. There are a bunch of other techniques on there that are very useful as well. All right, so I've used up enough of my time. I'm going to hand it back over to Kevin, and he's going to show you some really cool stuff as well.
All right. I'm showing Tableau Public. Can everybody see my screen now? Ken, can you see it?
Yep.
All right.
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to have the same problems that Ken has, little pictures of us talking and little navigation on Zoom here, but we'll get through it. So I'm going to be talking first about creative uses of navigation buttons. So Ken kind of really got into technical stuff. I'm going to be doing maybe, I don't know, a little lighter, but just as handy, just as useful as some of the techniques that he's using. So first off, what's a navigation button? A navigation button allows you to navigate from one dashboard to another. These came out in 2018.3, about a year and a half ago, and really, really handy. The way of doing it before was just silly. So let's take these two charts, or these two dashboards. We have a scatter plot dashboard, we have a bar charts dashboard, and to use a navigation button, all we really need to do is drag that out to the view. We can click on the caret there and edit. I can choose that I want it to navigate to the bar charts window. I can choose as an image button or a text button. For now, I'm just going to say bar chart. I can change the color. Let's make something really ugly. Hit OK. Now, if I click this button, we go to the bar charts tab. So I can add another button and to navigate back to the scatter plots dashboard. So that's really nice. One thing I don't love about it is that's really not a very nice looking button. I chose terrible colors. I probably could have done a little bit better, but this squared off look, I just don't like it. So I tend to use images, and I create all those images in PowerPoint. In fact, Ken does the same thing, and we saw so many people that kind of asked about that constantly. We decided to make them for you. So I have a Tableau dashboard on my Tableau Public page. You can download a template into PowerPoint, and it has all these different buttons that you can download. You can customize, change your text, your fonts, your images. We got things like new morphism buttons and toggle buttons. So all kinds of different things, 100 different buttons. So if you don't like make buttons out of PowerPoint, you can certainly download this and save some time. But when I use image buttons, I like to use them for different purposes. Not only do I like to use buttons for navigation, but I like to use them for other things as well. So this is a dashboard that talks about winning streaks in Major League Baseball. I think this was from 2019. And if you're not aware, there are 6 divisions in Major League Baseball. So I have 6 different dashboards. and I allow the user to navigate across those dashboard using dashboard navigation buttons. But not only am I using them as buttons, I'm also using them to call out what that division is for this entire dashboard. So we're looking at the AL West. If I click on AL Central, it's a navigation button, but I change the color. Everything else is grayscale, and I change this one to color. If I jump over to National League Central, we see National League Central, we see National League lit up, and we see my Reds in last place as normal. So kind of a nice use for navigation buttons, just to kind of tell the user where they're at. I also tend to use this for minimizing and maximizing dashboards. So we have this in Windows, where I have the ability to minimize and maximize a window in Windows. So I tend to apply this same kind of technique to dashboards. So what I do it with a lot are small jitter plots or small scatter plots that really might need additional investigation. And I allow users to basically zoom in to that particular chart. How's that done? Well, it's done by duplicating a dashboard. I don't love duplicating sheets, but I'm okay duplicating dashboards as long as that, the same sheet is used in both of the dashboards. So how might we do something like this? Well, let's go over to the demo. This dashboard, just so you're aware, this is a blog post I wrote about avoiding what I call the current month drop off. Sales are coming along just fine, and then all of a sudden they plummet. Well, why'd they plummet? Well, you're only 3 days into the month. So these are a bunch of different techniques that you can kind of more clearly notate a current month. But in this, I gave these navigation, this min-max, minimize and maximize options so that you can kind of dig in a little further. So how would we do this? Well, what we would do is make a duplicate of this dashboard. I want all the same stuff up at the top, so let's just duplicate that dashboard. And on this duplicated dashboard, I'm going to get rid of everything I don't want. What I'm going to do is do a maximize button on this particular chart. So I'm going to delete that container. Delete that. Oh, I missed. Delete. I'll get there eventually. All right. So now I have this dashboard, and then I have this chart by itself on this dashboard. So all we really do is drag in a navigation button. I'm going to choose edit. I'm going to navigate to the min max demo 2, very creative naming, Kevin. I'm going to change it to an image button, and I'm going to go get this pop out icon. I'm not going to spend much time formatting it, so I'm just going to put that down there, and I'm going to come to this one. I'm going to do the same thing. Go to min max demo, pick an image button. This time I'm going to choose this pop in image. Again, not going to spend any time with formatting. Probably should make that smaller. And now if we go back to the dashboard, we have this really simple minimize or maximize and minimize options. So just like Windows. Again, I use this really commonly for small jitter plots or small scatter plots that just need more investigation. I also like to use dashboard navigation buttons for table of contents. So this workbook is on my company Tableau public page. It's RDS, Recovery Decision Science, and it's an unemployment workbook. So I was tasked in April or March of 2020, when all the craziness happened, to build a unemployment workbook for our Tableau public page and really for our internal use. As I dug into the data, I just kept building dashboard after dashboard after dashboard. And in the end, I ended up with 18 different dashboards. And that alone was a challenge of how do I allow users to navigate to it? I could use text or, just use tabs at the top, but I wanted something a little more visual. This is going to be something we were going to be putting out to, out in the public. And I thought it would be better to have some sort of visual view. So what I ultimately did was use navigation buttons to build this, visual table of contents. So we'll do a little quick version of that. I've got a blank dashboard here, and then I have 4 different dashboards. We're going to do it with 4 different ones. And this little thing is in my way again. If you weren't aware, you can come up to dashboard and export image. And by doing that, you'll export an image of this dashboard. That's what we're going to use for our navigation buttons. So I'm going to just drag, I don't want to horizontal yet. I'm going to drag out a vertical, and I'm not going to be as precise as I normally would, but we're just going to put two horizontals and a vertical. I'm going to distribute them evenly, and then distribute, try and distribute those evenly. And now I'm just going to drag out a bunch of navigation buttons, 4 for now. And I've already gone through and made images here. So if we want to navigate to the first one, all I'm going to do is go pick the demo TOC1, an image, and we're going to pick image number 1. I'm going to do the same thing with this one. Demo TOC2, image, and pick 2. I'll save you the time and won't do the third and the fourth, but now we're starting to see this sort of visual table of contents come together. I tend to like to do a little more with it. I'll put a little gray border around that, and it doesn't really look that good there. So maybe we'll add some padding, and that's not what I wanted. I want to kill that and add some padding here. And eventually you'll figure out what those numbers are. You can apply it to all of them. You can have this nice little window. Then we can tile in some headers, names, so that you have something that looks a lot like this. And then we have this really easy way for people to navigate the entire dashboard. As I clicked, it didn't work. So just have these different options to click at, and see exactly what they're going to be going to versus just some sort of name. Now, I think probably what everybody's thinking is we look at these numbers and there's a spike on the end for unemployment, but we're now 12 months, a year past when that spike occurred. So is this potentially a little bit misleading? Well, what happened is you probably guessed, I took these snapshots of these dashboards when I created the initial dashboard. So this happened in probably April 2020. Well, the data's changed. These numbers have come down. So is this potentially deceiving? I think you could probably argue that these are small enough you're not really gaining any insights from them. And when you click the buttons, you can actually see what's going on. And you can see, well, I haven't updated this, so this is a static version, but you can kind of see the actual data, right? But you may say, how can we make this dynamic? How can we make these charts, instead of using these sort of these images, how can we make these charts dynamic? Well, we can absolutely do that. Just a little trickier. So when we're building a dashboard, we're using sheets. We're not using dashboards in dashboards, we're using sheets. So if we want to make this dynamic, instead of using images of the dashboards, what we're going to use is individual sheets, right? We're going to use individual sheets within a dashboard to make that dynamic table of contents. So what we might do is say, drag out this sheet. This is going to represent dashboard 1. Now dashboard 2 has 2 sheets in it that seem to be very important. So maybe we'll drag out a horizontal container. We'll put one sheet in here. We'll put another sheet in here. Now, the one problem with this technique is it's kind of hard to make it look as good as you might if you were building it for a dynamic dashboard, meaning I've built this to look like this on this particular dashboard, but when we're using it on this dynamic table of contents, it doesn't look that clean. So if you really want to do this, and we've done this a couple times at work, you might need to duplicate a sheet. I don't really like duplicating sheets that much, just because that means if you make a change, you got to make it twice. But if for this case, maybe the pluses outweigh the minuses. So this is not very clean, but right now we've got dashboard 1, we've got dashboard 2. Since it's built of actual sheets, when the data updates, it's going to update as well. But how do I click on it, right? I can't really click on these to navigate to another dashboard. So let's hold that thought, and we'll come back to that momentarily as we work into the next section. Next section I'm going to talk about is transparent shapes and images. So transparent shapes and images. A lot of people go, what the heck is a transparent shape? Well, I'll show you what a transparent shape is by jumping back into PowerPoint. So in PowerPoint, if I go to Insert, Shape, and just pick a square, it's going to bring in this big yellow square. Now, if I go to Format and go to Shape Fill and change the shape fill to No Fill, you can see the center of it's transparent. We're just left with a border. And then if I go to Outline and pick No Outline, that shape has essentially disappeared. But if I select it, you see that shape is actually still here. If I right-click on this and save as picture, what's going to happen is this is going to be saved as a transparent image. It's an image, it's there, you just can't see the thing. So how the heck could something like that be beneficial to us in Tableau? Well, I've got about 12 different reasons why. Let's start with this particular use case. If you follow Jeff Schaefer and his website, Data Plus Science, he talked about this ABC thing. This, you're building a table out of just dimensions and you get this ABC. How do you get rid of it? He had, I think, 5 or 6 different ways, including what we call the cheat code, the Tableau cheat code, like the contra, up, down, left, right, A, B, select, start, whatever it is. So he has this little cheat code. It's really tricky, really cool. I'm not going to ruin it for him. Go to his website and check that out. But he does talk about a couple techniques. So historically, if I wanted to get rid of this ABC, the easiest way is just go to Polygon. Change to a Polygon, nothing's gone. What stinks about that is if you like animation in Tableau, I do. I put animation on every single dashboard I create. I just like the smooth transitions. Polygons will break it. Polygons, if this sheet is in your dashboard, it's not going to animate. So I avoid polygons at all costs. So sometimes we might put an inline calculation of quote, quote, and we'll throw that on text. Okay, that does it. But as we hover over it, and we could fix this, but you hover over it, you see the little quotes, and I can still pick this field, even though, like, why would there's nothing there. Why should I be able to select it? So maybe we'll do a circle, and I've seen this done a lot. We'll make it all, opacity 0 all the way down, and then we make the size small. But then we still have this weird thing where there's this dot here, and I can actually select it. So you can probably see where I'm going with it. I don't like any of those options. So the option I always take is to change this to a shape. And the shape's kind of disappeared because I've made it all one color. There we go. So let's do that. Okay, now you can see the shape. And I've loaded transparent shapes into my shapes repository. I use it so much, I put an @ symbol in front because I want to get to it quickly. Believe it or not, there's 7 different transparent shapes in here. You just can't see them. It doesn't really matter which one I pick, but I'm going to pick one, apply it. Now the thing's gone. It's not in the tooltip. And when I pick it, it doesn't grab that cell. So it's a really, really clean approach to getting rid of the ABC. Now you're thinking, oh, we spent 10 minutes on the ABC. Well, there's a lot more to it and a lot more reasons why I use it. So let's assume we have a chart like this, and Ken kind of showed some tricks using the hide function. I do it a completely different way. So let's say we're looking at this chart. This is a chart that's common in my office. We build these sort of models and we compare it against random. So this is a random line. If I had 10% of the accounts, I would expect 10% of the profit. 50% of the accounts, I would expect 50% of the profit. So this gray line is just showing random. And this is showing my model performance. So in this case, my model at 10% of the accounts is getting me 21% of the profit. In most of our marketing materials, we want to focus on just one percentage. At 40% or at 30%, what is my return? At 30%, instead of random of 30%, I'm getting 47% of my profit, right? So how would I do that? Well, in most cases, in most cases, we create a new calculation. Right now, you can see this is a dual axis. So I've just got sum of profit on both. One's a line, one's a circle mark. If we were going to do this, most people would create a calculation. If the percent of accounts equals 0.3, I'm going to mark 0.3. Maybe we use a parameter for this. I'm just hard coding it for the sake of this. Then yield me the sum of profit. Otherwise, nothing. Or null. And then we put that up here. We change the mark to a circle. And then you can see we have all these nulls. That's all these nulls are for these values up here where it's not 0.3. Okay. I like that. That works. But I think there's a much, much easier way. What if I were to just take the percentage of accounts, and on the second axis, we'll change the second axis to a shape. We'll put this percentage of accounts on shape. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change all but the one I want to a transparent shape. I changed them all for the sake of that. We'll change 0.3 and boom. So now we don't need an additional calculation. All we did was drag percentage of accounts onto shape and change all of them to a transparent shape, except for the one we're interested in. And again, we could do this with a parameter and just do a true false and just assign the truths. In fact, we're going to do something similar to that right here. So what if I wanted to, Ken kind of showed the min and the max. What if I just want to mark the last point? I do this all the time in charts at work. I just want to mark the most recent point with a circle, and the rest will have for no circle. So we might have a calculation, without a transparent shape, we might have a calculation that looks something like this. If the date trunk of the month of the order date equals the fixed max, then give me the sum of sales, else. I don't have an else in here, but it's always else null if you don't have one. And then we can use that under do, forget all that. I'll keep this really simple. If the month equals the fixed max month. So if the month in my view equals the largest month or the most recent month in my total, in my dashboard, then I'm going to yield a true. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before, kind of touched on what I was going to do. Drag this true false calculation onto shape, go to shape, and I'm going to set the truths to a circle. I'm going to set the false to a transparent shape. And we instantly have this marked on the end of our chart. And as the dates change in our dashboard, that fixed maximum value is going to change, and that shape is going to go along with it. So really easy way to do without without overcomplicating our calculations, and sometimes without any calculation at all. So Ken was talking about bands earlier and using table calculations to do some year-over-year bands and month-over-month bands. I've got some really simple bands here, and Ken kind of mentioned this weird selection thing. As I hover over it, I got this weird black outline and this blue square, and you can't change the color of that square. But guess what? There is a way to fix this, and you can probably guess what we're going to do. We're going to use a transparent shape. So I am going to go to this and just duplicate this sheet. And as I click on here, you can see this sort of weird selection. And I'll give credit where credit is due. This came from Josh Tapley. He sent this to me when I was writing this blog post. And gosh, this is the coolest tip I probably have here. So we have this set as text, but if we wanted to make this so it wasn't so weirdly selectable, all we need to do is change it to a shape. Now we could change it to a circle, and we can still select this circle. And sometimes people just make it really big. That just doesn't usually work. You usually have some sort of line. You could change the color of it, but easiest way, why make it hard on you? Change it to a transparent shape. Now, if we go back to this dashboard, here's that weird selection, and here's what it looks like with a transparent shape. Really, really clean. I like that it sort of grays out the ones that you're not selected, because you may be using this for a filter or for some sort of dashboard action. So really, really clean look compared to this. Every single band I created since writing this blog post uses a transparent shape on it. So there you go, Ken. Answer to your question. This one comes from Luke Stanky. Luke in this viz shows the sales by subcategory, and then he shows the year-over-year change. So in this particular one, phones is the highest value, but it was second last year. It moved up one spot. Where chairs was first last year, it moved down one spot. So this is showing the change. So it's a little hard to interpret these red one and this blue one. Yeah, you could probably guess this went up one and this went down ones, but let's make it more clear for the user. Let's add a shape. So we've got this shape of circles here, and it's just a red circle and a blue circle. Let's make the blues, let's make them sort of this up arrow, meaning it went up. The reds, they went down, and we hit OK. So that's really clear. It went up one spot from last year. The chairs went down one spot from last year. But what about these guys that stayed the same? Storage was number 4 ranked last year and is number 4 ranked this year. It didn't make any movements. So we don't have a number associated with it. We don't want to show anything. Perfect solution for this situation is a transparent shape. Didn't move. Let's show nothing. Okay. So up until this point, we've shared pretty much just use cases for transparent shapes. Well, what about transparent images? Transparent shapes being something that you use in your Tableau repository, in your shapes repository. Well, sometimes you just need transparent images for other purposes. So here is some text talking about Tableau. This is from Wikipedia. Now, you may be aware that if you put an actual URL like HTTPS, and I click on that, it'll actually go directly to. It'll turn this text into a hyperlink automatically. But we rarely want to type out this entire URL. If I'm talking about Tableau software and I want to link to Tableau's website, I'm not going to want to type out https://www.tableau. I'm not going to do all that, right? I really just want this sort of underlying hyperlink. Well, I can't really do that in a text box, but we can do that using a transparent image. So I'm going to drag out an image on top of this text. Now I formatted this text. I'll come back to that. I formatted this text to just be blue and underlined. That was just in the text box. Now I just drag this transparent image over top, and we're going to use the target URL here. So let's see if I can get it right without //www.tableau.com. So we've got this transparent image with a target URL. And I forgot to pick the image. That would be helpful. Let's come up here, and I just leave them all in my shapes repository. So I pick transparent image. I put a target URL. Sometimes my computer seems to freeze up with images. So now you can't see the thing, but if I hover over it, you see I now have the ability to click, and it goes to Tableau's website. So this is a really quick way to add a link to any text. I could, in fact, down here, this is a link to my blog post. This is a link to the viz. So, and that's just using transparent shapes overlaid on top of text. So now with that in mind, I think we can go back to our dynamic table of contents and solve how we use a sheet and click on a sheet to go to a different dashboard. Well, similar technique, we're not using an image, but let's drag out a navigation button. We're going to plop it right down on top of this sheet. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to pick this. We're going to set it to go to page 1 first. And we're going to pick an image. We're going to choose a transparent PNG. Hit OK. Now you can't see the thing, but when I click on it, it navigates to page 1, right? So we build this sort of grid of our sheets that are updating dynamically, and then we just slide over on top of it a transparent navigation button. Really, really simple technique to create a dynamic table of contents. In fact, I did this for this blog post, and for this viz. So when I wrote the Transparent Shapes blog post, I wanted just kind of a fun landing page. I made it look like kind of a hex map, right? And I could have made each one of these shapes a button, but then, these shapes are always square, right? So these things kind of wouldn't fit in well. They'd be overlapping each other. I just said, I'll build the design however I want, and then I'll just float a transparent shape over top of it. And that would act as a navigation. So if you look, all these have this little different transparent shape over top of it that allows me to navigate to that particular dashboard. Lindsay Betzendahl, while I was building this viz, actually wrote a blog post on that. So check out our website, Viz Zen Data, for more on that, but same general technique. I use a lot of buttons. I think we talked about that earlier, right? So I like to use them for filters, to really denote where you're at. So this is a simple use case of looking at sales over time and being able to filter it by year. So these buttons are built and use parameter actions. I click on the button and it'll filter this to show 2016, for example, or 2018. But if you're like me, you probably notice, man, that looks so weird. There's this weird black outline, and it's like not consistent all the way around. It's just a weird, bad UI, if you ask me, and I don't like it. So I use transparent. It would be much nicer if it stayed looking like that versus like this. So I tend to use a transparent image to fix that problem. So what I essentially do is I leave these in the background. The parameter actions are still set in generally the same way, but I duplicate this sheet. And instead of using these buttons that I've created for 16, 17, 18, 19, I use a transparent shape. I'll show you that. So I've got this floating on top of it. We have these buttons back behind here that still have that weird selection. But as you see, as I move my cursor, we have buttons that are transparent. You can't see them. So if I just float that over and I click on, say, 2018, the parameter action is working on the transparent shape. But since I showed you with the bands, transparent shapes can't be selected, you have this really, really clean look. The buttons in the back are showing through the transparent shapes, and I'm not able to select the transparent shape itself. So I have this really, really clean look. I use this technique a lot when I'm using buttons. A blog post I wrote, gosh, only 3-4 months into using Tableau, my no polygons technique, it uses a transparent shape. Ken recently wrote a blog post about scrollable timeline that uses a transparent shape. I recently built the Data Fam Finder. I don't know if you're registered for this. If you want to check it out, you can. The goal of this was to have people register across the world and then allow people to select somewhere around their town and to see what other Data Fam members are around. Or for example, I'm gonna, once all this COVID stuff is down, I'm gonna travel to Phoenix. I can click on Phoenix and it'll give me an idea of who is around the Phoenix area. It uses a buffer calculation, and then it uses the new download functions to the CSV. But you can see here, we've got 335 members registered and 20 of them are in that range, that 1,000 mile or kilometer range that I selected. Well, how did I do that? Because I also state that I use a parameter actions to feed in the lat and the longs to create this buffer calculation and to use a distance calculation to figure out what's all in there. Okay, all that aside, how can I click anywhere in the map and send a lat and long to it? You can't do that. You need a mark to do that. You need to click on a mark. I can't just click anywhere in a map and feed in a lat and long. Well, what I did was I grabbed a data set that listed 26,000 cities in the US. And then I loaded that in and kind of union that to my Google Sheet where I had people register. But for the people that registered, I just made them this sort of circle mark. And for all these other cities, these other 26,000 cities, well, I made them a transparent shape. If I change this to, say, a star, you'll see I've got all these different cities marked that don't have somebody associated with them, but I've had them marked and using a transparent shape. So if I change this back to a transparent shape, then what that essentially allows me to do is click pretty much anywhere in the world, and I can draw that buffer calculation and find the people in that general area. So I use transparent shapes 2, 3, 4 times in any dashboard. This one uses over 26,000 of them. All right, I'm done talking. That's it. That's Ken and Kevin's obscure Tableau techniques. Hopefully you'll use them in your day-to-day work. I know that everything we've talked about, I use very, very frequently. I use those transparent shapes and images every single day, multiple times a day. It's such a time saver. So I didn't get to look at the Q&A while I was speaking, obviously. If anybody has any questions, be happy to answer them now.
I think we got them all.
Yeah, it
Did
looks
you?
like you
Good
answered
job.
most of the questions as you're going through. Thanks for everything that you've done today. It's been a pleasure to have you here. Just a couple of things for me. Tiled versus floating. You seem to float a heck of a lot. Do you float in business sense as well as public, or?
I don't float that much. So my technique follows the Curtis Harris YouTube video about containers. I start off by floating a container, then I tile within that container. That's how I build every single dashboard. You remove that hierarchy that just goes in your layout tab. So float the first container, tile within. I do float some buttons. I do use the transparent float over top button thing, but for the most part, it's 90% tiled. Ken, same for you?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. If I tile unless I can't tile, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And certainly there are a lot of personal projects where tiling just doesn't work very well, so I end up floating a lot of it. But for business stuff, it's almost all tiled with a few floating elements.
Exactly.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, that was just when I was watching you. Then I was like, he's floating everything. But no, it's okay. I'll let you off. But yeah, I think that was the most of the questions that came in. Loads of people are saying thank you in the chat. So they're really impressive tips. Your workbooks, will they be available on your public page to send the link out to as well? Or have you not thought about that yet?
The workbooks themselves are not. Everything that we went through are built out in blog posts in detail. Most of them have corresponding Tableau public workbooks with them. So if you go to this link, you should be able to get to all that different content. It's just a little bit more broken out. Like the dashboard navigation stuff is a couple of different blog posts. The transparent stuff is one blog post. So it's a little bit more broken out than just all comprised in one workbook.
Okay, perfect. Thanks very much. There's no other questions in the Q&A, so thank you so much both for coming today, and we'll get the recording out to everyone else as soon as possible. How can be a member of the Order of Operations, someone's just said.
Not sure what that means.
George, do you want to expand on that one a little bit? If not, George can email us over and we can get it over to you anyway. Just a joke. Okay, well, thanks everyone. Really appreciate everyone joining and staying for the whole amount of time. So thanks everyone and goodbye.
Thanks everyone. Bye.